Welcome back. We're going to be
Yes,
doing another episode of the SCP podcast to make sure
yes.
the audio
So
levels are
very
good.
exciting.
Yeah, to make sure the audio levels are good. Say something.
Mm, Apple.
All right, that seems fine.
Mhm.
Uh, I, on the other hand, seem a little louder than I want to be, so I'm going to turn myself down a little bit. Do you remember what I said we were going to be talking about last time?
Something about the Crimson King, JoJo. How does the racing time work? Something about that.
We're going to be talking about the Scarlet King.
Close enough.
Which is the closest thing in the SCP universe to like an actual chaos god from like Warhammer.
Oh God.
Yeah, there's a lot of lore and it gets pretty nutty. So this is a picture of the yeah,
Well,
this
we're
is
starting off fantastic.
that's what we're gonna be talking about. Let me pull up my notes.
What
Which
is it
slide
with
do we
chaos
want?
gods and eyes? Like freaking eyes symbology is always relevant in like chaos gods because it's like Slanesh has a whole bunch of eyes on her crap. Uh Slanesh.
Yes. So
But no, like eyes are a big thing in like gods for some reason.
yeah, and he specifically has seven eyes. Seven is a big number with the Scarlet King, which coincidentally is also a big thing with Slaanesh. But
It's also a big thing with biblical Christian texts because seven is known as the number of perfection.
yes, so the Scarlet King. I'm going to go over it. Um, so you want to take a guess what number the Scarlet King is in SCP lore?
Oh boy, if I could, I know it's not 77. Uh, I don't know. It's probably like it's probably like 488 or something.
So it is one of the few proposals for SCP-001.
Oh, great! I know some of these proposals, and I already know how these typically go.
So it used to have object class Keter, but it's been downgraded to object class Safe. Not for good
Why?
reasons. We'll get into that. We are going to be talking about basically, we're going to be telling you about this basically in story format through the
Oh no,
doctor assigned to research the Scarlet King, whose name is Dr. Montauk.
the
Now,
Scarlet King or the Doctor?
wait, what? The
Is the
doctor,
Scarlet King?
the
Is the
doc,
Scarlet King's name Doctor Montauk?
no, the researcher assigned to research the Scarlet King, his name is Dr. Montauk.
Oh, okay.
Dr. Montauk is an interesting man. He's basically a normal researcher and he's studied this longer than pretty much anyone else. He is the expert in the Scarlet King. Um, yes. The, in its special containment procedures, the following is blah 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 blah. If I can read, let me move this closer to my eyes. The following Oh my god. Following the
The
recent
guy who has blue
investigations of Dr.
glasses.
Robert Montauk, no action is currently needed to contain SCP-001. It is functionally self-containing, and any Foundation interference may harm or alter its containment irreversibly. No Foundation personnel are to engage with any new matters related to SCP-001, with the exception of related anomalies already in Foundation containment. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, the Scarlet King is very interesting. It is
It sounds like a recipe for disaster.
it is a
Honestly,
mul-
this whole thing sounds like a doomsday clock scenario.
it is a doomsday clock scenario.
Oh
So there is
God.
something in SCP. Let me see if I can find the exact word for it because I know it's in this article. Uh, yeah, most of this is stuff that we are going to talk about later on, so I don't think I need to bring up most of the stuff in this document. I believe it's called an NK end of the world class scenario. And that is something that is very uh, tied in. Now, we're going to talk about the history of the Scarlet King. So, in human history, in almost every culture throughout all of history, each one of them has had a tie into the Scarlet King. It's always described as the same way, with the color red and then some symbol of royalty. So some cultures call it the Red Khan, the whatever the hell the Japanese word for red is, shogun, like whatever's red and then whatever means royalty, it has been described as that, and it has been attributed to this. The Scarlet King basically, it takes shape in belief. What that means is basically the biggest. Do I want to talk about that now? No. Yes. Yeah, it's popped up throughout history, and only within the past 80 years has it been growing in power. And that's specifically because of the SCP organization. Because the more that you research and look into the Scarlet King, the more powerful it becomes. The more influence it has.
That's terrible.
It is terrible. So, there are, they're called phases here, but they're called laws. There's 3 laws. The law of blood, the law of concrete, and the law of the howling. Now, I'm going to sum up what these mean. Oh my god, these are long documents.
Says the guy who researched everything beforehand.
I did research everything beforehand, and I'm glad I did, because this is a huge document. But the law of blood is basically the law of the old. It is the war and death and blood and disease. It is living without basically the modern, abandoning what makes society, and instead moving towards chaos and the old ways.
And so then corn.
Similar, yes. The law of concrete is embracing the new, embracing medicine, embracing technology. And the law of the howling is the conflict in between both. And wherever that conflict in between the new and the old exists is where the Scarlet King gains power.
So basically, it's Scarlet King is a person who gains power off of people's disagreement on the old way and modern technology.
Yes.
In essence.
And the more power he gets, the closer he gets in between to coming into our reality.
Oh, Jesus. Well, that's just fun and fine.
Yeah, it's not good times. And that is why the Scarlet King has been downgraded from a Keter class SCP to a safe class SCP. Because they basically wanted to keep its 001 classification as brief and simplistic and non-detailed as possible, and they basically wanted to make it as mundane as possible to not feed the Scarlet King. The more people worry about the Scarlet King, the more people fear the Scarlet King, the more power he has.
Alright, I get that. So what can this Scarlet King do?
It's less about what he does and more about who does things for the Scarlet King.
Oh no.
So, the Scarlet King is a pretty passive entity, but his followers are not.
Oh, great.
So now we're going to be talking about the cult of the Children of the Scarlet King.
They couldn't have just called themselves the Cult of Red? Really?
No, they specifically decided to call themselves the Children of the Scarlet King.
Well, yeah, that okay, that makes sense. It's like Children of the Scarlet King, but I thought their name was the Cult of the Children of the Scarlet King. It's like, well, that's a mouthful.
Yes. So as I said, Dr. Montauk was doing all the research on the Scarlet King for years and years. And because he had been looking into Scarlet King, looking into
Did
its
he become
history.
one of these cult
Oh,
members?
give me 1 second. We'll talk about that in a second.
Huh, well, he totally did.
Where is the pause button? And we're back. So basically, I'm trying to remember what I was saying. Since Dr. Montauk was looking into the history of the Scarlet King, and for years and years, this had been slowly feeding the Scarlet King and expanding its influence ever so subtly, birthing the children of the Scarlet King from an organization in the SCP universe called the Serpent's Hand. The Serpent's Hand are basically like the anti-SCP. If SCP is all about taking, containing, and securing, they want all of this information, the fact that these anomalies exist, in the public domain. They want everyone to know about them. They think it's wrong that the SCP's organization is hiding them, and they just want everything out in the open. When
Well,
they
that's
learned,
stupid.
yeah, when they learned a little bit of trivia. Dr. Bright's sister is actually one of the members of the Serpent's Hand.
You know, if you had said that to any other doctor, I would have been like, I don't believe you. But since it's Dr. Bright, yeah, I can totally see that.
Yeah,
But here's the
Dr.
thing, it's just like I understand where they're coming from with the serpent's hand thing. And it's like you shouldn't be because like a lot of these things are dangerous if you really don't know about them, which I totally get. But the thing is, a lot of these things are more dangerous if you know about them.
This is very true.
Because
But they think people
I
should
think I
know
know.
about the dangers of this of the world that they live in.
Yeah, I get that, but at the exact same time, a lot of the SCPs are like very Lovecraftian. Like, well, there's really nothing you can
Yes.
do to stop them. Like, there was this one SCP, and I forget what it is, but it basically hides itself as graffiti. And if you get really close to the graffiti, there will be terrible things done to you. And then it just disappears. It's like, what do you do against that? You can't wash it off even if you know about it. I guess if you know about it, you can avoid it, but still, you
Yes,
know,
but we'll
I
do a
get what
whole
they're saying, but
episode
that's kind
talking
of
about the
dumb.
Serpent's Hand and other organizations. Uh, because there's also another one called the GOC, which is
Oh,
similar to the SCP organization, except instead of securing, they are all about eliminating. Uh,
see, I feel
Doctor
like
Doctor Clef used to work for them.
which makes sense. I feel like the SCP is kind of like the CIA, where it makes its own enemies.
Yes, and it's not like they can hide everything, but basically,
Well,
the
yeah, duh.
Children of the
Honestly, I'm
Scarlet
very
King.
surprised that they are. Oh, sorry. I
No,
was just
you
gonna
go.
say, I'm very surprised that they're able to hide a lot of stuff. Like, how do you hide a planet?
It's because
How do you hide a planet?
they have access to these incredibly powerful amnestics, which I believe relates back to SCP. It's like 4,000 something. But there's this giant sea leviathan that lives in the Pacific Ocean, and it excretes these incredibly high like amnestics, and it's not a good time. But they send agents in there to collect it, and they dilute it, and they can use it to basically memory wipe people.
Well, that's fun. Okay, so they just turned from CIA to Men in Black. Gotcha, cool.
Yes, is like that's part of the reasons why they secure, contain, and protect, because some SCPs have incredible benefits to humanity and actually can be of benefit to people. It just
But
is a
most don't.
case that most don't. Yes.
Yeah, most don't. Because it's like, I dare someone in the comments section to say, Peanut could benefit humanity. How?
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much. But yes, the Serpent's Hand, as soon as they learned the true intentions of the children of the Scarlet King, they were kicked off and they became a splinter organization. Upon them splintering off, their leader, named, oh god, I'm going to butcher his name, uh, Depeche, oh god, Spivak, Depeche Spivak. I don't know the origin of this name. But he's the leader, and their cult uh, basically kidnapped 7 girls, again, the number 7 again, and impregnated them with occult means. None of them raped these girls. A ritual happened, and they all became pregnant.
Oh, okay. Because I was about to say, well, this is taking a dark turn.
And they are referred to as SCP 231. And there are 7 instances for each one. So SCP 231 1, SCP 231 2, SCP 231 3, to all the way to 7. Now, with each one of these, each one of these girls became pregnant, and the SCP organization found the cult. They took all these girls in, and they arrested. I say arrested. They pretty much kidnapped the leader to interrogate them. Around this same time, a little bit after this, a little bit after they brought these girls in, and they actually had leads to the Scarlet King, and the doctor in charge of this initiative, again, was Dr. Montauk. His brother was kidnapped. He had a 14-year-old brother and completely disappeared. No one knew what happened. Montauk assumed that it had something to do with the cult. So he was a less than impartial negotiator, not negotiator, interviewer. Not interviewer. You know what I mean.
Yeah, no, I totally know what you mean.
Yeah, when he, God, it's not inspected. It's not interrogator. There we go. Interrogator when he was talking to this cult leader dude. In the cult, they also found this journal, and this journal had the details for a procedure later known as Protocol 110 Montauk, named after the doctor. In this notebook, it was basically how to prevent a birth, which is very weird for the children of the Scarlet. What's called? The children of the Scarlet King to have, because why would they want to prevent these creatures from being born if they're the ones who like impregnated them in the first place? But anyway, they tried to use this protocol on the first child that was born. It did not work, and when the first child was born, it birthed a creature that caused mass fucking casualties. Like, I'm talking about thousands and thousands of people dead.
See, this is what I mean. Like, how on earth does the SCP organization keep this crap from the public? Like, let's pretend for a second that the SCP organization wasn't like, real, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have a bunch of these anomalies running around. You would think that, like, eventually, with 7 billion people on Earth, you would think that, word would get out one way or another. And the SCPs, and the SCP organization, they're trying their best, but like you have crap like this.
Yeah, SCP also has a sleeper agents in almost every government agency, so they can learn about shit like this that happens pretty fucking quickly, and then they use their amnestics on pretty much everyone involved.
Now I get the fact that like because this is a candidate for like SCP-001, right? I understand that if the SCP organization was real, this story may technically not even exist.
Yeah.
But
this SCP is SCP 231. Like the Scarlet King exists. It just might not be the true SCP-001. But it definitely is real.
Mm.
But there is a
Anyway,
lot of
continue.
lack of canon in like SCP, and there's a lot of stuff that's hearsay when it comes to the Scarlet King. I'm just giving you the best interpretation that I managed to gather with all the research that I've done.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, continue.
Yeah, I'm not going to talk about like a lot of what ifs. What we know is that the documents themselves are correct. However, there's stuff that may be incorrect or may be up to interpretations. And I'm probably not going to go on that hearsay that much. There's one thing that I do want to bring up, though, but it'll come up when it comes up. Anywho, Dr. Montauk basically was very aggressive when he interviewed the leader, and the leader of this cult basically just chuckled and didn't tell him jack shit. That's when they tried to do the 110 Montauk on the next one, and again, another abomination was born. Many people fucking died, and it did not fucking go well. Not even a little bit. And each time they failed, up on the 6th, up on the all the way up to number 6. Each time failed. The baby was born, a calamity happened, and the mother died. Now, these mothers were referred to as the 7 brides of the Scarlet King. And there is a video I'm going to show you in just a second. I just want to get to the last one. The last one, they did a similar procedure to 110 Montauk that they told everyone was 110 Montauk. Some people believe that Procedure 110 Montauk is literally the most horrible thing you can possibly imagine. Some people believe that Procedure 110 Montauk involves rape, murder, stabbing. It is only perpetrated by D-class personnel because it is so horrible they don't want any permanent staff to go through what it truly is. It is said that they use amnestics to make the subject forget about the torture every 3 or 4 attempts to get the maximum feeling of terror every time it's committed. And then some say that Procedure 110 Montauk is simply a D-class reading a bedtime story to a little girl, and that the fear of what it actually is spread throughout the facility is enough to that belief that something horrible is happening is enough to suppress the baby being born.
Interesting.
And that's the one I prefer because I feel like snuff rape is not really a good storytelling device.
It's not good for the brand of the SCP
Yes.
organization.
Blah. Yeah.
Like freaking SCP just went all cannibal holocaust up in this.
Pretty much. This is the logo for the Children of the Scarlet King.
Makes sense.
These are the 7 brides of the Scarlet King. And number 7 is who we're going to be talking about now. She is the last one who is alive.
Number 7 turned into Shy Guy.
Oh, it's also a semi-common belief that the immortal lizard is one of these children that were born. I don't really like that, but
I don't believe that. It
yeah,
makes sense, but I don't think so.
yeah,
That asks a lot of questions
yeah.
that I don't think.
It's unknown what the SCPs are except for the last one, but I don't like that one. It feels like it's just shoehorning the immortal lizard into the story, which I feel like is kind of cliche.
I don't know. I just feel like that would raise a lot more questions than it would answer.
Yes.
It's just like, yeah, I guess that fills in a hole, but what about this, that, and the other thing? Like, when did the immortal lizard show up? He is the immortal lizard. So, also, and if that was true, also, if the immortal lizard is immortal and it was one of the seven, why aren't the other seven immortal? I mean,
Exactly.
why aren't the other six immortal? It's just
Well,
like, what makes him so special?
we don't know about the other ones yet.
Oh,
Except for like
oh,
we know that they like exist and we know that they've killed, but we don't know which specific SCPs they are or if they're contained or on the loose.
oh, well,
Probably
that's
because
fun.
the O5 Council probably censored that information to keep from feeding um
The
Mr.
Scarlet.
The Scarlet
Scarlet
King.
King over here. You do realize by the end of this podcast, we are gonna single-handedly like summon the Scarlet King because we're diving in too deep, man.
Probably. Now there's a video I want to show you, so I'm going to pull it up real quick. Yes, this one. Okay, so this is a YouTube video by an SCP YouTuber called the Volgun, and it is prophecy about the Scarlet King.
Oh, fun.
It's
Is
a
it?
quick video. It's like 4 minutes.
Is he going to bring donuts? Oh no.
You can tune into the stream, and then I'll start playing it.
Yeah, no, I see it right now.
Okay.
7 seals, 7 rings, 7 brides for the Scarlet King. They gather round the natal bed, the foolish and the wise. They fear the child yet to be born, whose voice shall rend the skies. The faithful watch the forest for the coming of the king. Their lanterns bright, they wait at night for the new world he shall bring. The dragon waits in shadows, his breath will scorch the land. The hero in the castle draws his sword and makes his stand. The princess in the tower is hidden far away, but nothing under heaven can keep the groom at bay. They gather round with leering smiles, the soulless and the dead. Though her soul unwinds, the cruelest minds will keep her in her bed. The potter told his prentice to prepare him 7 jars. 6 he made with grace and skill, the last his hands did mar. The cretin moon no more is howling, gone, its morning black. In their dreams its face is prowling, come to take them back. The king is in his courting clothes, the brides are in their beds. The unborn princes wait in sleep to raise their eager heads. The hens were in the hen house, and 7 eggs did lay, till the fox crept in by dark of night, and stole the eggs away. 6 were broken by their bindings, 6 no more shall sing. Comes the 7th full unwinding, and all the bells will ring. When the first had given birth, then all the birds did sing. Her screaming cries did shake the skies, as she called out for her king. By doctor's blade the 2nd bade a life into the world. Untimely hewn neath a silent moon, the king's red flag unfurled. His bride the 3rd remained unheard, her cries for help ignored. She stopped her life with a surgeon's knife, and gave it to our Lord. The 4th prepares a dagger, and places it at her heart. The perfect cure cannot make pure what the king has set apart. The 5th one's crown was bearing down upon the fox's set. The den was sundered with a mighty thunder, an apocalypse beget. On the 6th day, the walls gave way, and the oceans turned to ash. Her birth gave work, as the earth shook underneath the king's fell lash. The seventh bride will break the tides, the moon no more will shine. There comes a day not far away, she'll birth the death of time. The doctor never tells his god which one he really seeks. Instead, he hides himself away, and quietly he weeps. Their god's own voice, he makes the choice, declaring with their word, in fear and pain, let her remain, lest she be like the third. The doctor's gun ended his run as he put it to his ear. As she was defiled, the pitied child, he gave it to his fear. Her memory a fickle thing, the strongest shall endure. When her weeping starts to waver, their drugs make her mind pure.
So,
Well,
yeah, this goes
for
over.
me.
Yeah, this goes over what basically SCP 231 basically happened. The Fox taking the seven brides away, that refers to the SCP Foundation. The seven brides obviously refer to, again, the seven girls that were impregnated by the cult. This was by the Volgun, a popular SCP YouTuber. The link to his channel will be in the description. I highly recommend checking him out. He's got some pretty good videos. Yeah. So, yeah. Unlike, it kind of describes what happens in 110 Montauk. Basically, since Dr. Montauk had his brother kidnapped, and he thought that it was this cult who did it, he took out some of his rage by implementing 110 Montauk, which is pretty fucking horrible. And one of the biggest reasons why they don't think that they're using the same thing on the last girl is because they said they tried to use violence on all the other six, and the babies were still born. So instead, they used the fear of what 110 Montauk truly is to basically make everyone think that it's this horrible thing in order to appease the Scarlet King to prevent the baby from being born.
Well,
yeah.
That makes sense. I mean,
Belief in ritual is a huge thing in the SCP universe, especially when it comes to these quote-unquote old gods. We'll talk about some more of those on another episode, but basically old gods are only controlled through the belief of masses' ideas and beliefs and rituals. They don't make decisions the way we do. They obey the rules of ritual and tradition.
Okay.
But yeah, very wacky.
Very wacky indeed. You're still sharing. There
Yeah.
we go.
Talking about that. But yes.
You know what the Scarlet King reminds me of? It reminds me of the Void from Marvel Comics. And the Void, oh my gosh, I don't want this turning into a completely different podcast, but there's this character called the Sentry, right? And he is bound by the Void. And basically, the more people that talk about the Sentry, the more is likely that the Void comes out. It got so bad that like Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic, had to actually wipe everyone's memories of the Void of the Sentry, including his own. Like he had to wipe the Sentry's memory of the entire event happening just to keep the Void from coming out. And the reason is because when the Void came out for the first time, they said that they killed a whole bunch of heroes and over 1 million people across the world. And the Void slips out every now and then in Marvel Comics. This is really interesting, but that's what it reminds me of.
It is kind of similar. It is actually very similar. I believe there's a video on YouTube comparing the two together. But The
Void is so
last
cool. He's scary though.
the last bride did end up giving birth. But if you noticed in the story, it mentions a hero in the Volgun's video. The seventh child, unlike the rest, which is probably why this procedure was listed in the cult's book, because the last child, number 7, isn't like the rest. The last child is will be born a baby that will grow into a hero that may be able to combat the Scarlet King. Now, this SCP was born, and it is, I'm gonna send you the picture.
Oh, no.
Because you know this SCP.
Oh, no.
It is the terrible, the fearsome SCP-999. That one.
You're joking, dude.
No.
You're joking. No! You gotta be kidding me.
There he is.
That thing could be... Well, I guess that makes sense. No, wait. I have so many questions.
So,
wait a second.
999 has some very interesting anomalous properties. One of them is being literally able to cure depression.
It's black pudding except it's yellow mustard.
He's also colloquially known as the Tickle Monster.
Oh my gosh, and that's supposed to... Dude, this is like freaking, oh my gosh, I know there's a Marvel comic character, and I do not remember her name, but she could, like, influence people to be happy. And it's like, this is like that character beating the Void, and it's just like, I don't see it happening.
Well, to be fair, right now, 999 is considered a baby, so one day, the hope is that it will become stronger and stronger until it can rival the Scarlet King.
Yeah, so is freaking Kirby, and you can see what he does.
It has been known to basically help people. It's been known to protect people during SCP breaches. One of my favorite stories is when they introduced it to the Immortal Lizard.
What happened?
So, they introduced 999 into the Immortal Lizard's cell. It basically looks at it, says disgusting, then steps on it, and then it starts to, start shaking for a second. Not 999, the Immortal Lizard does. And it starts saying happy, and it's feeling happy. And then 999 gets up, and it starts tickling the Immortal Lizard, right next to its face. And this goes on for about 20 minutes until it starts saying, stop tickling me, stop. Then the Immortal Lizard basically goes to sleep. 999 gets called out of its pen. And then the lizard, as soon as it's removed, wakes back up, and it's acting strangely. And then a pulse of energy releases from its body, causing everyone in the facility to burst into a fit of laughter, and it uses that opportunity to escape. And it basically goes on a killing spree throughout the facility as 999 tries to save as many people as possible.
Oh.
So wow. They didn't do that again, because that's a really bad thing to happen.
For real, though.
But yeah, SCP-999 may one day have the capabilities to rival the Scarlet King.
You see, I could have sworn for a second that I could have sworn on something that you were gonna say. Yeah, when SCP, when the Immortal Lizard stepped on 999, he said happy and then exploded.
No, funny, it's not that easy to get rid of him.
Nah, I knew it wouldn't have been that easy. I thought he would have exploded and just been like, oh, well. Like, he would have came back, but...
Yes, few fun facts about 999. It's allowed to freely roam the facility. It gives a burst of euphoria upon touch. Any personnel are allowed to visit 999. You're not allowed to feed 999 soda. It gets hyper. Uh, and it has the consistency of peanut butter.
Mm.
Oh, it's also like really big. It's like 2 feet by like 1 foot, like 3 feet high. It's a big blob.
Apparently.
Oh, it can also change its shape at will. Just like different blobby shapes. It can't shapeshift or anything. Maybe in the future though, since it is still a baby. But yeah,
Mm.
it's object class safe. Uh, Eventually, Dr. Montauk did get an answer out of the cult leader. Apparently, a dimensional rift opened in the cult leader's cell, and no one could access his cell. And the cult leader wanted to talk to Dr. Montauk. And Montauk asked one last time before this man disappeared into another dimension, "Did you kidnap my brother?" And he laughed and said no, as he disappeared to another reality.
Well, dang. I feel bad for Montauk.
But it all feeds back into that theme of belief again. Since Dr. Montauk believed that they took his brother, he implemented horrible procedures and did horrible things to brides to try to get back at this cult leader who he believed did this shit. Um, Montauk tried to get the SCP Foundation to stop all like looking into the Scarlet King because he basically said like we only feed him when we look more into him. The SCP organization only half obliged this by downgrading it to safe, and this was nowhere near the levels that Dr. Montauk wanted it to do. He wanted like the records to be expunged. Like no one should be able to know about this. The more people that feed into it, the worse it gets. Because it grew like the Scarlet King. Like sure, it showed up in history, but it never had like a real presence throughout history until the SCP organization started actually looking into it.
Mm. Okay.
There's other SCPs that are like allegedly connected to the Scarlet King, but nothing that's proven. Um, Trying to think if I'm forgetting anything. I don't think I am. After this happened, Dr. Montauk was not happy with the way the SCP organization handled this, and he actually became one of the cultists, one of the children of the Scarlet King, because in his words, he'd rather be on the wrong side than on the side that does nothing at all.
Well, that is definitely one way to deal with that. And also
Yeah,
called it.
Dr. Montauk wasn't a good person, but
Apparently, there's not a lot of people in the SCP organization that's a good person.
yeah, Dr. Clef is mostly a good person though. But we'll talk
Yeah,
about
he's
the
just he just
doctors
wants to
next
kill a little
week.
girl.
Yeah, we'll talk about the doctors next week because Dr. Bright, Clef, and I believe Dr. Gears is another one. And I know a lot about Dr. Clef and Dr. Bright, but I don't know a lot about Dr. Gears. I'll have to do some research into him. But they have very interesting histories and like ways they view their jobs at the SCP organization.
Mm. Okay.
But yeah, Scarlet King, very wacky. Yeah, as I said, he's like the closest thing to a chaos god. In Warhammer, the different chaos gods get fed by different beliefs. He is any time the old clashes with the new, or people look into the Scarlet King himself and try to learn more about him, he grows in power and he becomes more powerful. But he hasn't done anything directly.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, like I said, it's kind of like the void where you have this like insanely like cuz the void is it is actually kind of scarily similar. How much this is scarily similar to the Void,
Mm.
honestly, because the Void, he'll straight up just kill people because people know about Reynolds.
Well, to be
Like,
fair, SCP isn't 100% known for their originality. Like, about a few weeks after the Doctor Who episode came out with the Weeping Angels, SCP Peanut was born.
oh, well,
173 existed, and you can see the similarities so in between that and that now.
yeah, like it is actually very strikingly similar,
They are very similar.
incredibly similar, actually.
But yes, the Scarlet King's always identified as red, and always a huge red imposing being with 7 eyes and some sort of crown.
Okay.
He's safe on the SCP Wiki. He didn't used to be safe. Dr. Montauk is the head researcher, or was the head researcher, looking into him. Going through the thing now to see if there's anything else. Oh yeah, he's extra dimensional, so he lives in alternate dimensions. He's located in 7 alternate dimensions simultaneously, and he is unable to enter the prime dimension. However, he is believed to have repeatedly attempted entry for a period of under 300 years.
Well,
And if he was to enter our dimension, it would be an NK, end of the world scenario.
well, sounds about right.
Oh yeah. It used to be top priority to like keep him contained, like to keep him out. But since it was top priority, all they were doing was letting him in even faster. So they deemed it unnecessary. So the way to deal with him is to literally not deal with him.
Yeah, that's actually a neat little thing. Because again, I always reference. I say the Void a lot, but it's literally because it's one is just kind of the greatest representation of this. Because it's the same thing with him. The way you deal with the Void is just not deal with them. It's like if the Sentry does not become a hero, the Void doesn't come out. Simple as that.
Yes.
And so it's the same thing with the Scarlet King. It's just like the way to avoid the Scarlet King massacring all life as we know it in the multiverse is just to not deal with him. That's why I mean, like, the freaking Serpent's Hand is kind of dumb. Because, like, yeah, I get it. There are certain SCPs that people really do need to know or be on the lookout for, because that's the only way you're going to avoid them. But at the same time, then you have things like this, where the public knowing about that would just jumpstart the whole situation.
Yes.
Well, this was very insightful. This was fun.
Apparently,
I'm traumatized now.
I forgot one thing.
Okay.
There's another SCP, SCP-2317, that I'm looking at right now because I saw it referenced in the Scarlet King SCP document. And apparently, if I'm reading this correctly, because I just skimmed over it really quick, this is a door that is just straight up a gateway into the Scarlet King's dimension. It says
great.
SCP-2317 is a primeval entity known as the Scarlet King, devourer of worlds. Name redacted intentionally. It's just black boxes where it should say Scarlet King, but it's Scarlet King. Not clear. It's a very vague document.
Yeah, it makes sense. I wonder what happens if you open the door and yet it's still vague. Like if no one knew about the Scarlet King, what would happen if you opened the door?
Well, As long as
It's
there's
kind of,
conflict in between the old and the new, in between technology and tradition, it will find a way to exist and thrive.
yeah, but it's kind of like that thing where it's like how Peanut, you have to constantly like lay eyes on him. Okay,
Yes.
what happens if I've been thinking about this for a while. What if you're blind?
I think you'd be fucked.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's very
It's any kind of observation on him. So even if you're looking at him like through a camera, that works.
true. What? That's insane.
He can't move if you're looking at him through a camera. So if you're live streaming like Peanut on your phone on Twitch, and you have like 100 followers, they're not all gonna blink at the same time. You'd basically freeze them for indefinitely. Peanut is like not a very scary SCP to deal with. It's just the fact that the game has made him really popular.
Yeah, that's very true. What if you're blind and you deal with Shy Guy?
You'd probably be fine.
Hmm. The only person that can deal with Shy Guy. He's just like a blind guy.
There's probably a test that they've done with it, but I'm not sure. Yeah, I think.
But yeah, it's like yeah. So yeah, Scarlet King. Honestly, not gonna lie, still an avid for Slanesh. You know, cause yeah, that Slanesh is a cool chaos god, and the Scarlet King is ill, yucky.
Yes. And
But yes, so yeah, Andrew, this was fun. I have a date with the immortal lizard, so yeah.
yeah, I think we're like an hour in, so I think this is a good time to end it. So yeah, we spent pretty much the entire time talking about the Scarlet King. Next week, I definitely want to talk more about the doctors of the SCP universe, and yeah, and then I think we'll talk about more miscellaneous SCPs that I find interesting.
Oh yeah, the doctors are terrible people. Well, all except a couple of them, but most of them are terrible people.
They have interesting stories and past, and like none of them started out as terrible people. Even Doctor
Well,
Bright.
well, no one ever does. But yeah, so I got a date with the immortal lizard, and he's not gonna be happy if I run late. So we're gonna have to cut this right here. Otherwise, yeah, we'll have another Code Z dialect. This is how you can tell I've never never done deep diving into this SCP organization because I'm just making up crap on the fly.
Yep, none of it makes sense, but hey, it's the thought that counts.
Is the thought
Anywho,
that counts. I know enough to get me by. I know some like really extraneous crap due to like night mind and crap like that. But hey, I'm trying over here, people.
anyway, if you made it with us this far, thank you for watching, and hopefully you'll be here next week. And we'll see
Yes,
y'all in the next
hopefully
video.
you'll be here next week. Ghosts of Christmas Past. They're obviously watching this video.
Okay. See y'all in the next video. Bye-bye.